In the UK, we've got some quite clear definitions that help us to actually be able to see distinctions within this. So for example, enterprise is all about the enterprising person. They're creative, innovative, flexible, adaptable, and can see opportunities. The entrepreneurship side is more about being able to understand business, to work with tax, cash flows, things that are important such as intellectual property, so that we can look at the learners and the way they develop. In the sense of assessment, this also helps us dramatically, because we can also consider, what are we looking at here in the individual? Are we looking at their ability to come up with many ideas, be creative and innovative, or are we looking at their ability to fit in with the norms we might expect in business? The split definition is really helpful. If you are looking at a learner's performance and they are adaptive, flexible, doing all the sorts of things that an enterprising person would do, we can look at it in that light. That requires an element of understanding surprise. Anything innovative is going to be new. If we then want our students to understand evaluating business performance through cash flows, through business planning, tax, intellectual property, those are knowns. So we can work against a known learning environment. It's far less risky, that second part of entrepreneurship education. The ETC toolkit is something developed by Enterprise Educators UK, and when you say across the board, this means across disciplines to us. So, for example, in agriculture, they're very good at predicting futures, working out what they need, having that future visioning that we look for in entrepreneurship. You may find in some courses they're a little less confident with the finance, a little less confident working out exactly how they're going to employ people and work with other people, maybe networking. So by using the disciplinary strengths, we can then pull out the weaknesses and work across the board to get a full picture for any discipline. So the enterprising education, entrepreneurship education split comes into play again. To complement this, the EU's EntreComp framework is now being used as well. Whereas it started off with the UK Quality Assurance Guidance, it now integrates EntreComp's 15 competencies as well. So looking at those 15 competencies, we can look at the bigger picture about what it means to be entrepreneurial. Since March this year, our Quality Assurance Agency in the UK is asking every subject benchmark statement, and that's the gold standards for each subject area, to incorporate things like sustainability, enterprise and entrepreneurship. So I'd just like to give you a little insight into some of this by quoting from anthropology. So hard business metrics may not be in this and they may need to support that. But let's just take a deeper look. We learn about human differences, biological, historical and cultural complexity. They're trained to seek out evidence, understand and incorporate change, compare and contrast information, learning to make connections that others may not have made. So that all sounds very entrepreneurial, doesn't it? Enterprise Educators UK run a series of events that are cutting edge. They respond to the needs of the moment. So there might be 8 or 9 of those every year, and they come up as and when the need arises. There's also a national conference that focuses on the how of learning and teaching, not purely the academic discussion, more a personal feedback response mechanism. What that means is that the educators come together in practical terms, share what's worked and what hasn't worked. We also have the professional standards framework, and this enables us to look at different levels of teacher ability. The idea behind the professional standards framework is aligned to and mapped to actually the QAA enterprise and entrepreneurship guidance that I mentioned earlier. This means that as they develop and as they evolve, teachers can get formal recognition through the way that they reflect that shows how they're developing as entrepreneurial teachers. Well, as a designer, the first step was to think about who could contribute and who would support. So we had a very, very wide range of stakeholders. When we looked at, for example, what sports education could bring, they were already looking at distinctions between learning about, learning for, and learning through. So sports education informed what we were doing in that way. We then took a range of these insights and took them to the Quality Assurance Agency for Higher Education, who agreed we needed something that was interdisciplinary to take full effect of the opportunity for more developed entrepreneurial education. Probably the most concerning, perhaps pending issue is training educators. This means a shift from perhaps some of the knowledge-based work we've been more familiar with, and we're now looking at the competencies. So we need to see a big picture here, a developmental picture, from primary to secondary and perhaps all the way through to postdoctorate. So in terms of entrepreneurial learning, we've got 10 years, actually a little more, 10 years experience of doing this, but there's a lot more to learn about developing teachers who can really deliver and evaluate learner performance. Main recommendation really is all about understanding how the innovation process works. That might mean, for example, stepping back as well as stepping forward at times to let the process evolve. You, of course, have to consider all of the stakeholders. Not always easy, and the stakeholders will change. So being flexible and adaptable to really pick up on the stakeholders that matter is an important aspect. The call for action is really about embracing those who can innovate by looking to the future and who can propose big ideas without necessarily being able to pick up on all the details. There are rules and regulations we must consider. However, they shouldn't be the starting point. If we do that, we could find ourselves doing something that we call premature articulation. Premature articulation is when you've come up with a solution based on the limited thinking that you're using, and it doesn't really pick up the full value of what could be developed.